The Silver Clock Inn nestled in the misty hills of Devon, its ancient timbers groaning under the relentless patter of autumn rain. It was the evening of October 15th, 1932, and a disparate group of guests had assembled in the oak-paneled dining room, the grandfather clock ticking ominously toward midnight. Sir Reginald Hargrove, the wealthy industrialist, raised his glass of port to toast the gathering, his face flushed with merriment. But as he sipped, his eyes widened in horror. He clutched his throat, gasping before collapsing face first into his dessert. Poison. The word hung unspoken in the air as the storm outside raged on, trapping them all within. Who among them had committed this foul deed? Chapter 1. The Unexpected Invitation. The train exhaled a long, weary sigh as it drew into Ashford Hollow, its iron flanks slick with the rain that had pursued it across the breadth of England. Hercule Poirot, seated in a first-class compartment whose velvet cushions had long since surrendered to the damp, closed the leather-bound volume of Balzac he had been pretending to read and allowed himself one precise, almost imperceptible shiver. It was not the chill of the October evening that disturbed him. Poirot was a man who kept his body at a temperature regulated with the same exactitude as his thoughts, but the faint, insidious prickle of anticipation that always visited him when the ordinary world tilted, just a fraction, toward the extraordinary. He rose, adjusted the perfect crease of his trousers, and retrieved his Malacca cane from the luggage rack. The corridor outside was empty save for a porter who touched his cap with the deference due to a gentleman whose reputation preceded him even into the wilds of Devon. Poirot inclined his head in return, a gesture both courteous and regal, and stepped onto the platform. The station was little more than a slate-roofed shelter and a single gas lamp whose flame guttered in the wind. Beyond it, the hills rose in folds of black velvet, their crests lost in a sky the color of tarnished pewter. A motor car, an Austin Swallow, its paintwork the deep green of holly leaves, waited at the curb, its headlamps cutting pale tunnels through the drizzle. The chauffeur, a young man with the raw-boned look of the local yeomanry, leapt to attention. "Monsieur Poirot, sir? Captain Hastings sent me. Name's Wilkinson. Car's warm and the inn's not 10 minutes up the lane." Poirot permitted himself to be handed into the rear seat as though it were a state carriage. The door closed with a solid, reassuring thunk, and the Austin purred into motion, tires hissing over wet gravel. Through the window, the village of Ashford Hollow unrolled like a half-remembered illustration from a child's picture book. A Norman church tower, a row of thatched cottages exhaling peat smoke, a village green where a single duck quacked indignantly at the intrusion of headlights. Then the road climbed, twisting between hedgerows heavy with berries, and the headlights swept across a sign that swung creaking on its chains. The Silver Clock Inn Est. 1685. Fine wines. Excellent table. Discreet company. The inn itself appeared at the crest of the hill as though conjured by a stage magician. A long, low building of honey-colored stone, its mullioned windows aglow with amber light. Ivy clung to the walls like the fingers of an old lover, and above the arched entrance hung the eponymous silver clock, a disk the size of a cartwheel, its face etched with Roman numerals and intricate gears that caught the lamplight in fleeting, hypnotic flashes. Even from the motor car, Poirot could hear the measured tick that seemed to issue not from the clock itself, but from the very bones of the building. Wilkinson brought the Austin to a halt beneath a porte-cochere where lanterns in iron cages flickered like captive fireflies. Before the chauffeur could open the door, it swung inward, and a figure filled the rectangle of light. A man of middle years, corpulent, with a waistcoat that strained at its buttons and a face the color of uncooked pastry. His eyes, small and bright as currants, were fixed upon Poirot with an expression that mingled anxiety with something harder to name. Calculation, perhaps. Monsieur Poirot, 1,000 welcomes. I am Elias Thorne, proprietor of this humble establishment. Captain Hastings telephoned from London, said you'd be arriving on the evening train. Everything is prepared. Everything. Thorne's voice was a curious blend of West Country burr and the polished vowels he had no doubt acquired from years of serving the gentry. He extended a hand that trembled slightly, whether from nerves or the cold Poirot could not yet determine. The detective took it, noting the dampness of the palm and the faint scent of brandy that clung to the man's breath. Enchanté, Monsieur Thorne. One is always gratified to be expected. Thorne ushered him into the entrance hall, a cavernous space paneled in dark oak and lit by a chandelier fashioned from stag antlers. The air was warm, heavy with the aromas of beeswax, wood smoke, and something more elusive. Juniper, perhaps, or the ghost of 100 forgotten dinners. A grandfather clock, twin to the one outside, though smaller and encased in walnut, stood sentinel at the foot of the staircase. Its pendulum swung with the solemnity of a priest administering last rites. Your room is the Tudor suite, top of the stairs, first on the left, Thorne continued, gesturing vaguely. Dinner is at 8 sharp in the dining room. We have a full house this weekend. Sir Reginald Hargrove and his party. A retreat, they call it. Business and pleasure, though between you and me, monsieur, there's precious little pleasure in that gentleman's company. Poirot's eyebrows ascended a fraction. Sir Reginald Hargrove, the industrialist? The very same. Patents, factories, more money than the Bank of England. Or so he'd have you believe. He's taken the entire West Wing. Lady Evelyn, his wife, is with him, and a doctor, Langston, I think. Plus a young lady who writes books and my own lad Geoffrey to see to the horses. A rum lot, if you'll pardon my saying. Poirot pardoned it with a smile that revealed nothing. He had heard of Hargrove, a man whose name appeared in the financial pages with the regularity of the tides, whose inventions in precision timing mechanisms had made him both fortune and enemies. That Hastings had summoned him here suggested complications beyond a mere social gathering. A boy of perhaps 12, freckled and gap-toothed, materialized to take Poirot's valise. Thorne clapped his hands. Geoffrey, show Monsieur Poirot to his room, and mind the stairs. They're uneven after 3 centuries. The boy led the way up a staircase whose treads creaked in a minor key. Portraits of long-dead Thornes glared down from the walls. Bewigged gentlemen with lace cuffs, ladies in farthingales, all sharing the same suspicious eyes. At the landing, a window looked out upon the rear courtyard where stable boys were leading horses into their stalls, their breath pluming in the cold. Beyond, the hills rolled away into darkness, and somewhere a fox barked, a thin, lonely sound. The Tudor suite was a chamber of unexpected splendor, a 4-poster bed hung with tapestries depicting the labors of Hercules, a fireplace where logs spat and hissed, a writing desk of burr walnut, and a bow window overlooking the inn's walled garden. Geoffrey deposited the valise and lingered, twisting his cap in his hands. Begging your pardon, sir, but are you the detective? The one what solves murders? Poirot turned, his gaze mild. One has been known to interest oneself in such matters, yes. The boy's eyes widened. Only there's talk downstairs. Sir Reginald's in a proper temper, shouting about patents and thieving and such. And Lady Evelyn, she's been crying in the rose garden. Cook says it's a bad omen, guests arriving in a storm. Poirot laid a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. Omens, mon petit, are the invention of those who fear the inevitable. Run along now, and tell Monsieur Thorne that I shall descend at 7:45. Left alone, Poirot removed his overcoat and Homburg, hanging them with precision on the valet stand. He opened his valise and extracted a small Morocco case containing his toiletries. A badger hairbrush, a cut-glass bottle of eau de Portugal, a pair of silver-backed brushes monogrammed HP in flowing script. He arranged them on the dressing table with the satisfaction of a general deploying troops. Then, drawn by curiosity, he crossed to the window. The garden below was a formal knot of yew hedges and gravel paths, illuminated by lanterns that swung gently in the wind. A woman stood beneath a pergola heavy with late roses, tall, slender, clad in a cloak of midnight blue. Even at this distance, Poirot could see the glint of fair hair beneath her hood and the restless movement of her hands as she plucked petals and let them fall, like drops of blood onto the path. Lady Evelyn Hargrove, no doubt. Her posture spoke of agitation restrained by breeding. A door opened somewhere below, and a man's voice boomed across the garden, harsh, peremptory, laced with the authority of one accustomed to obedience. "Evelyn, inside, woman, before you catch your death. We've business to discuss." The woman stiffened but did not turn. After a moment, she let the last petal fall and walked slowly toward the house, her cloak swirling like smoke. The man, Sir Reginald, Poirot presumed, followed, his bulk filling the doorway. Even from this height, the detective could read the tension in the set of the baronet's shoulders, the proprietary hand that settled on his wife's arm as they disappeared inside. Poirot consulted his pocket watch. 7:32, time enough for a brief reconnaissance. He descended the stairs with the silent tread of a cat, pausing on the half-landing where a suit of armor stood guard. From here, a corridor led to the west wing, its door ajar. Voices drifted through, male, argumentative, punctuated by the clink of glass. "Steal my designs and call it progress? You'll see you in court, Langston, or in hell first." "Threats, Hargrove. How original. But the patent office will decide whose name goes on the application." Poirot's lips curved. Dr. Victor Langston, then, Hargrove's rival in the lucrative field of chronometric innovation. A third voice, female and cool as spring water, intervened. "Gentlemen, if we might return to the matter at hand. The prototype is secure?" "Secure as the Bank of England, Miss Beaumont, though I'd trust my own vault over this rustic mausoleum. Clara Beaumont, the novelist." Poirot filed the name away. He had read her latest work, The Shadow in the Dial, a tale of obsession and mechanical betrayal. Life, it seemed, imitated art with suspicious alacrity. A clock chimed the 3/4 hour, its notes reverberating through the inn like a warning. Poirot continued downward, arriving in the entrance hall just as Elias Thorne emerged from a side door, wiping his hands on a towel. "Ah, monsieur. Refreshed, I trust? The dining room is this way." He led Poirot through an archway into a room that might have served as the refectory of a minor abbey. A vaulted ceiling, whitewashed walls hung with tapestries of hunting scenes. A long table of polished yew set for 7. Silver candelabra marched down its center, their flames reflected in the dark surface like stars in a midnight lake. Place cards in Thorne's spidery hand indicated the seating. Sir Reginald at the head, Lady Evelyn to his right, Dr. Langston opposite, Miss Beaumont beside him, Poirot at the foot, and 2 places as yet unoccupied, presumably for Thorne himself and his son. The guests were already assembling. Sir Reginald Hargrove dominated the room as he dominated every room. A bull of a man with a florid complexion, a walrus mustache, and eyes the pale blue of glacier ice. He wore evening dress with the air of a man who considered black tie a uniform of conquest. Lady Evelyn, by contrast, was a study in restraint. Ivory skin, ash-blonde hair coiled in a chignon, a gown of smoke-gray silk that shimmered when she moved. Her eyes, when they met Poirot's, held a plea she would never voice. Dr. Langston was lean and saturnine, his dinner jacket a fraction too sharp, his smile a fraction too thin. He inclined his head with the courtesy of a duelist acknowledging an opponent. "Miss Beaumont, Clara was younger than Poirot had expected, perhaps 30, with raven hair and the kind of bone structure that made artists reach for charcoal. She wore a gown of deep claret that left her shoulders bare, and around her neck hung a pendant shaped like a tiny silver clock. "Poirot," Hargrove's voice cracked like a whip. "Heard of you, of course. Hastings said you might drop in. Hope you're not here to poke into my affairs." "On the contrary, Sir Reginald," Poirot replied smoothly. "I am here at the invitation of my friend Captain Hastings, who spoke of a weekend of intellectual stimulation. One does not refuse such an opportunity." Hargrove grunted, mollified. "Well, sit, sit. Thorne's wine is tolerable, and the pheasant's worth the journey." The final guest arrived as they took their places. Young Geoffrey Thorne, transformed from stable boy into waiter by the addition of a white jacket 2 sizes too large. His hair was slicked back with water, and his hands trembled as he poured the sherry. Poirot noted the boy's eyes, resentful, watchful, flicking toward his father whenever Thorne's back was turned. Conversation flowed like the wine. Hargrove on the future of British industry, Langston on the inefficiencies of current timing mechanisms, Miss Beaumont on the psychology of invention. Lady Evelyn said little, her fingers shredding a bread roll into crumbs. Poirot listened, his gaze moving from face to face, cataloging the small betrayals of posture and expression. At 8:15 the first course arrived, consommé madrilène, its surface trembling like liquid garnet. Hargrove raised his glass of amontillado. "To progress," he declaimed, "and to those with the vision to seize it." Glasses clinked. Poirot sipped, savoring the nutty sweetness. Then, as the soup plates were cleared, Hargrove leaned toward his wife. "Evelyn, passed the decanter. The 09 port. Thorne's keeping it for after the fish." Lady Evelyn obeyed, her movements graceful but mechanical. The decanter, heavy crystal, its stopper a silver fox, passed from hand to hand until it reached Hargrove. He poured a generous measure, raised it to the light, and inhaled with theatrical satisfaction. "To the silver clock," he toasted. "May it tick forever in the cause of profit." He drank. For a moment, nothing. Then his eyes widened, pupils dilating until the irises were thin rings of ice. A strangled sound escaped his throat, half cough, half scream. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against his plate in a spray of ruby liquid. Hargrove clutched at his collar, tearing the starched fabric, his face congesting to purple. He toppled forward, forehead striking the table with a sound like a melon dropped on stone. Chaos erupted. Lady Evelyn's scream, Langston's barked command for space, Miss Beaumont's hand flying to her mouth. Geoffrey stood frozen, a soup ladle dripping onto the carpet. Thorne burst through the service door, his face the color of tallow. Poirot was already moving, his chair overturning with a clatter. He reached Hargrove's side, fingers probing the carotid. Nothing. The man's eyes stared sightlessly at the chandelier, reflecting its flames like twin funeral pyres. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. Cyanide. Swift. Merciless. He straightened, his voice cutting through the hysteria like a blade. "Mesdames et messieurs, compose yourselves. The doors. Lock them. The telephone lines. Check them. No one leaves this inn until the truth is known." Outside, the storm broke in earnest, rain lashing the windows like grape shot. The silver clock in the hall struck 9, its chimes echoing through the suddenly silent room. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the candlelight, a murderer smiled. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Shadows. The dining room of the Silver Clock Inn had transformed in the space of a single heartbeat from a haven of civilized indulgence into a tableau of frozen horror. Sir Reginald Hargrove lay sprawled across the damask tablecloth, his port wine glass shattered into a constellation of crimson-stained shards, his face a grotesque mask of purple congestion and bulging eyes. The air, moments before redolent of pheasant and rosemary, now carried the faint, acrid bite of bitter almonds. Cyanide's unmistakable signature. Hercule Poirot stood at the foot of the table, his small, immaculate figure the only still point in a room that seemed to vibrate with shock. His green eyes, bright as a cat's in the candlelight, moved methodically from face to face. Lady Evelyn Hargrove, her gloved hand pressed to her mouth as though to stifle a scream that had already escaped. Dr. Victor Langston, half risen from his chair, his medical bag clutched like a weapon. Miss Clara Beaumont, the novelist whose dark eyes glittered with a fascination that bordered on the unseemly. Elias Thorne, the innkeeper, hovering in the doorway with a soup tureen still steaming in his trembling hands, and young Geoffrey Thorne, the waiter, whose white jacket was now spattered with port like fresh blood. Silence. Poirot's voice, though soft, cut through the rising babble like a scalpel. "Madame, compose yourself. Monsieur le Docteur, you will examine the body, mais vite, but touch nothing else. Monsieur Thorne, lock every external door and window. Geoffrey, fetch blankets to cover Sir Reginald. We must preserve the scene exactly as it is." For a moment no one moved. Then, as though Poirot's words had broken a spell, the room erupted into frantic but obedient motion. Lady Evelyn sank back into her chair, her face the color of candle wax, her breath coming in shallow, panicked gasps. Dr. Langston snapped open his bag with a crack that made Miss Beaumont flinch. Thorne lumbered toward the windows, his keys jangling like a jailer's. Geoffrey darted away, returning moments later with a woolen traveling rug that he laid over the corpse with the reverence of a pallbearer. Poirot knelt beside the body, his movements precise, almost delicate. He lifted Hargrove's limp wrist, noting the absence of pulse, then gently turned the head to examine the mouth. Froth, tinged pink, clung to the lips. The tongue was swollen, protruding slightly. Classic signs. He sniffed the shattered glass. Yes, the almond scent was stronger here, mingled with the sweet richness of the port. But the decanter, still 3/4 full on the table, gave off no such odor. The poison had been introduced to the glass alone. "Doctor," Poirot said without looking up, "your professional opinion?" Langston, who had been listening to Hargrove's chest with the stethoscope, straightened. His face was grim. Dead within 90 seconds of ingestion. Potassium cyanide, almost certainly. The convulsions, the odor, the cyanosis, it's textbook. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were about. Précisément. Poirot rose, brushing an imaginary speck from his sleeve, and the dose was massive, enough to fell an ox. This was no accident, no misadventure with rat poison. This was murder, deliberate and premeditated. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Lady Evelyn made a small animal sound of distress. Miss Beaumont's hand crept to the silver clock pendant at her throat, her fingers tracing its gears as though seeking comfort in mechanism. Thorne, who had returned from securing the windows, wrung his hands until the knuckles blanched. "But who?" the innkeeper stammered. "We're cut off, the storm, roads flooded. No one could have—" "Au contraire," Poirot interrupted gently. "The murderer is here among us. The doors were locked, the windows barred. The poison was administered in this very room under our noses. And so we shall begin with the glass." He lifted the stem of the shattered goblet with a napkin, careful not to disturb the residue. The break was clean, the bowl separated from the base, but the rim, the rim told a story. A faint oily sheen coated the inner lip, invisible to the casual eye, but unmistakable to Poirot's trained senses. He brought it to his nose. Almonds, yes, but beneath it something else. Wax, perhaps, or a trace of cosmetic. "Curious," he murmured. The poison was not in the wine, but on the glass, applied to the rim to be licked off with the first sip. Ingenious. The port merely masked the taste until it was too late. Dr. Langston leaned closer, his brows knitting. A contact poison. But cyanide isn't typically— Non, Poirot agreed, but dissolved in a viscous medium, lip salve perhaps, or cold cream. It could adhere long enough. The heat of the glass, the moisture of the wine would release it. A method both elegant and lethal. Lady Evelyn's eyes widened in horror. You mean someone painted poison on his glass? But we all drank from the same decanter. Exactly, madam. The decanter is innocent. The glass was the weapon, and the weapon was chosen with care. Poirot's gaze swept the table. Who poured Sir Reginald's port? A silence thick as velvet fell. Then Geoffrey, his voice barely above a whisper, said, I did, sir. From the decanter. But I never touched the glass itself, only the base when I set it down. And before that, Poirot pressed, who handled the glasses before dinner? Thorne cleared his throat. I laid the table myself, monsieur. Polished every piece. The glasses were clean. I'd stake my life on it. Poirot's smile was wintry. Let us hope it does not come to that, monsieur. Still, between the polishing and the pouring, there was opportunity. The glasses sat unattended for how long? Perhaps 20 minutes, Thorne admitted. I was called to the kitchen, the souffle, 20 minutes. Ample time for a murderer with steady hands and a steady nerve. Miss Beaumont spoke for the first time, her voice low and musical, with a trace of amusement that set Poirot's teeth on edge. But surely, Monsieur Poirot, you don't suspect one of us? We're civilized people. This is 1932, not the Borgias. Civilization, mademoiselle, is a thin veneer, Poirot replied. Scratch it and the savage emerges, and savages, I assure you, are remarkably resourceful. He turned to Lady Evelyn, who sat as though carved from ice. Madam, you were seated beside your husband. Did you observe anything unusual? A hand lingering near his glass? A flicker of movement? She shook her head, her pearls trembling. I was distracted. Reginald was agitated. He'd received a telegram just before dinner. Something about the patent office. He was furious. A telegram? Poirot pounced. Where is it? In his pocket, I think. Her voice cracked. Oh, God, Reginald. Langston, with Poirot's permission, reached into the dead man's breast pocket and extracted a folded sheet of buff paper. He unfolded it carefully, his lips moving as he read. Then he handed it to Poirot without a word. The message was brief, typed in block capitals. Patent rejected. Langston's design superior. Stop. Appeal futile. Stop. Poirot's eyebrows ascended. Tiens. A motive, perhaps. Dr. Langston, you knew of this? The doctor's face was a study in controlled fury. I received a similar communication this afternoon. Hargrove's been trying to muscle in on my chronometric governor for months. Claimed it was his invention. The man was a thief in patent leather. Yet you dined with him, Poirot observed. A curious choice for enemies. Hargrove insisted on this retreat to resolve our differences, Langston said bitterly. I came to protect my interests. I had no idea he'd be. He gestured toward the corpse. Miss Beaumont leaned forward, her eyes bright. But if the patent was rejected, Sir Reginald's fortune was at stake. Debts, I've heard. Whispers in London. Perhaps he had enemies beyond this table. Perhaps, Poirot conceded. But the method suggests intimacy. This was personal. The murderer knew Sir Reginald's habits, knew he would toast with port, knew he would drink deeply. This was no stranger's work. He moved to the sideboard where the decanter stood amid a battalion of bottles. The port was a Croft 1909, its label faded but intact. He lifted it, swirling the liquid gently. No sediment, no discoloration. He poured a thimbleful into a clean glass and tasted it. Rich, velvety, untainted. Then he examined the stopper. A silver fox, its eyes tiny rubies. No trace of poison there. Geoffrey, he said suddenly, you served the wine. Did you notice anyone near the sideboard before dinner? The boy swallowed. I was in and out, sir. But Miss Beaumont was here earlier. Said she wanted to sketch the decanter for her new book. Something about objects that tell stories. Miss Beaumont laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. Guilty as charged, Monsieur Poirot. I'm a writer, I observe. But I assure you I was merely admiring the craftsmanship. The fox stopper is exquisite. Poirot's gaze lingered on her. And your lipstick, mademoiselle, what shade do you favor? She blinked, then smiled. Revlon's fatal apple. Why do you ask? Because, mademoiselle, the residue on Sir Reginald's glass has a faint red tint. And fatal apple is, I believe, a deep crimson. A hush fell. Miss Beaumont's smile did not waver, but her fingers tightened on her pendant. A coincidence, monsieur. Half the women in London wear red lipstick. Perhaps, Poirot said, but coincidences like red herrings are the murderer's stock in trade. He turned to Thorne. The staff? How many tonight? Just myself, Geoffrey, cook, and the 2 maids. They're in the kitchen, terrified. I've locked them in for their own safety. Bien. No one enters or leaves this room until the police arrive. The telephone lines. Down, Thorne said miserably. The storm took them an hour ago. The nearest constable is in Ashford Hollow and the bridge is under water. Poirot's expression did not change, but his mind raced. Isolated, cut off, trapped with a killer. The classic ingredients of murder. He glanced at the windows where rain lashed the panes like impatient fingers. Somewhere in the distance thunder rolled and the lights flickered, dimmed, then steadied. Doctor, he said, you will remain with the body. Madame, you will retire to your room. Geoffrey will escort you and lock the door from the outside. Mademoiselle Beaumont, you will accompany Monsieur Thorne to the kitchen to reassure the staff. I will search the public rooms. We meet again in 1 hour in the lounge. Personne moves alone. Lady Evelyn rose unsteadily. But my husband will be safe with Dr. Langston. Come, madam. As Geoffrey led her away, her silk gown whispering like a ghost, Poirot caught a glimpse of her face in the mirror, pale, composed, but with eyes that burned, with something fiercer than grief. Fear? Guilt? He filed it away. Alone with Langston and the corpse, Poirot began a meticulous examination of the table. He lifted each glass, sniffed, tasted. Nothing. The bread, the salt, the pheasant bones, all innocent. But beneath Hargula Hargrove's plate, half hidden by a fold of damask, lay a small folded square of paper. Poirot unfolded it with tweezers from his pocket kit. Meet me in the conservatory. Midnight. Come alone. C.C. Clara? Or someone else? The handwriting was hurried, the ink smudged. A lover's tryst? A blackmailer's summons? He slipped it into his waistcoat pocket. Langston watched him, his expression unreadable. Find something? Perhaps. Tell me, doctor, Sir Reginald's heart. Was it weak? Langston hesitated. He consulted me 6 months ago. Angina. I prescribed digitalis, but tonight he was in fine fettle, boasting, drinking. The poison overwhelmed him before his heart could protest. Merci. Poirot moved to the windows, examining the locks. Solid, undisturbed. The French doors to the terrace were bolted from within. No entry there. He stepped into the corridor, his footsteps muffled by the thick Wilton carpet. The grandfather clock ticked solemnly, its pendulum catching the lamplight like a scythe. He paused, listening. Somewhere above, a door closed softly. Footsteps light and quick crossed the landing. Lady Evelyn? Or another bolder soul? The conservatory lay at the end of the west wing, a glass-walled appendage filled with ferns and the heavy scent of earth. Poirot entered, his torch beam cutting through the gloom. The note had specified midnight, still 2 hours away. But the murderer might return to the scene. A glint caught his eye. On the tiled floor, half hidden by a palm, a single red petal. A rose petal, fresh, its edge bruised as though crushed by a heel. He picked it up, sniffed. Jasmine, not rose. Lady Evelyn's perfume. Had she been here earlier, weeping in the garden? Or meeting someone? He pocketed the petal and continued his circuit. The library, the smoking room, the pantry, all empty. But in the cloakroom, a man's overcoat hung askew, its pocket bulging. Poirot reached inside and withdrew a small glass vial stoppered with wax. The label in spidery script, KCN 5G potassium cyanide. Enough to kill a dozen men. The coat was monogrammed, VL Dr. Victor Langston. Poirot's pulse quickened. A frame, or carelessness? He slipped the vial into his pocket just as footsteps echoed behind him. He turned to see Miss Beaumont, her silhouette framed in the doorway, a cigarette glowing between her fingers. "Looking for something, Monsieur Poirot?" Her voice was silk over steel. "Merely satisfying my curiosity, mademoiselle. And you?" "I couldn't sleep. The storm. And the murder." She exhaled smoke, watching him through the haze. "You suspect the doctor?" "I suspect everyone," Poirot said evenly, "including novelists who sketch decanters and carry crimson lipstick." She laughed, softly. "Touché. But if I were the murderer, he'd hardly leave my calling card on the glass." "Unless," Poirot said, "you wish to implicate another. A rival, perhaps. Or a lover." Her eyes narrowed. "You're dangerous, monsieur. I like that." She turned to leave, her heels clicking on the tiles. Poirot watched her go, then examined the vial again. The wax seal was intact, but a faint smudge of red marred its edge. Lipstick, perhaps. He returned to the dining room where Langston stood guard over the body. The doctor's face was pale, his hands clenched. "Poirot," he said urgently, "I've been thinking. The poison, it couldn't have been in the glass rim." Hargrove licked his lips after every sip. "He'd have tasted it sooner." "Unless," Poirot countered, "the poison was encapsulated. A thin sugar shell, perhaps, dissolved by the port's acidity, released only when the glass was half empty." Langston stared. "My God, that's diabolical." "Oui, and it narrows our window. The murderer knew exactly when Sir Reginald would drink deeply enough to break the capsule." He glanced at the clock. 10:47. 1 hour until the rendezvous in the conservatory. Time enough to set a trap. "Doctor," he said, "you will remain here. Lock the door behind me. Admit no one but myself." Langston nodded, his eyes flicking to the bulge in Poirot's pocket, the vial. Suspicion or fear? Poirot stepped into the corridor, the cyanide vial heavy in his hand. Somewhere in the inn, a clock chimed the 3/4 hour. The storm raged on, and in the shadows, the murderer waited. Chapter 3. The initial suspicions. The lounge of the Silver Clock Inn was a cavern of oak and shadow, its walls paneled in the same dark wood that seemed to drink the lamplight rather than reflect it. A fire crackled in the grate, spitting sparks against the stone hearth. But the warmth did little to dispel the chill that had settled over the room like a shroud. The storm outside had reached its crescendo, wind howling through the eaves as though the very night itself mourned Sir Reginald Hargrove's passing, or celebrated it. Hercule Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small, neat figure silhouetted against the flames. His hands were clasped behind his back, his mustache waxed to twin points of impeccable symmetry. Around him, the surviving guests sat in a loose semicircle, their faces illuminated by the flickering light. Lady Evelyn Hargrove, pale and composed in a high-necked dressing gown of dove gray. Dr. Victor Langston, his medical bag at his feet, his eyes darting like a cornered animal's. Miss Clara Beaumont, a cigarette burning forgotten between her fingers, her claret gown replaced by a severe black skirt and blouse. Elias Thorne, the innkeeper, hovering near the door as though ready to flee, and young Geoffrey Thorne, perched on the edge of a chair, his white waiter's jacket discarded in favor of a sweater that smelled of stables and fear. The grandfather clock in the corner struck 11, its chimes reverberating through the room like a funeral bell. Poirot waited until the last note died away before speaking. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice soft but carrying the authority of a judge, "we are prisoners of the storm, yes, but also of the truth. Sir Reginald Hargrove was murdered in this house, at this table, by one of us. The method was cyanide, administered with precision on the rim of his glass. The motive, ça, c'est la question. But before we seek the why, we must establish the how, the when, and the who. And so we begin with alibis." He paused, letting the words settle. Lady Evelyn's hands twisted in her lap, the pearls at her throat catching the firelight. Dr. Langston shifted, his chair creaking. Miss Beaumont exhaled a thin stream of smoke, her eyes never leaving Poirot's face. "Madame Hargrove," Poirot continued, turning to the widow, "you were seated beside your husband. You poured the port." "I did not." Lady Evelyn's voice cracked like a whip. "Geoffrey poured it. I merely passed the decanter, précisément. But you handled the glass before it reached Sir Reginald. Did you not adjust it, turn it so the stem faced him?" She hesitated, her fingers stilling. "I may have. It's habit. Reginald was particular about such things." "Bien." "And during dinner, where were you when the glasses were set out?" "In the powder room," she said quickly. "I felt unwell. The journey, the storm. I was gone perhaps 10 minutes. 10 minutes? Poirot repeated. Ample time to apply poison to a glass if one knew which glass would be Sir Reginald's? Her eyes flashed. Are you accusing me, Monsieur Poirot? My husband is dead, and you... I accuse no one yet. I merely establish facts. He turned to Dr. Langston. Monsieur le Docteur, you were opposite Sir Reginald. You claim rivalry over patents. Tell me, where were you before dinner? Langston's jaw tightened. In my room, changing. I came down at 5 minutes to 8. Ask Thorne. He greeted me in the hall. Thorne nodded vigorously. True, sir. The doctor was punctual. And during the 20 minutes the table was unattended? I was in the library, Langston said, reading. Alone. Alone? Poirot echoed. Convenient. And you, Mademoiselle Beaumont? The novelist crushed her cigarette in a crystal ashtray, her movements deliberate. I was in the conservatory, sketching. The light there is perfect, even in a storm. Geoffrey saw me. He brought me a cup of tea at 7:30. Geoffrey flushed. Yes, miss. You were drawing the orchids. Orchids, Poirot mused. And from the conservatory one has a clear view of the dining room windows. Did you observe anyone near the table? She shook her head. The curtains were drawn. But I heard voices. Sir Reginald and the doctor arguing about gears and governors, nothing unusual. Poirot's gaze shifted to Thorne. And you, monsieur? You laid the table, yes? Polished every glass myself, Thorne said, his voice trembling. Then cook called me. The soufflé was rising too fast. I was in the kitchen until Geoffrey fetched me, when Sir Reginald collapsed. Leaving the dining room empty, Poirot said, And you, Geoffrey? Where were you? The boy swallowed. In the stables, sir. The horses were restless with the thunder. I came in through the scullery just before dinner. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. So we have opportunity for all. Now motive. He reached into his waistcoat pocket and withdrew the telegram Langston had found on Hargrove's body. He read it aloud, his voice steady. Patent rejected. Langston design superior, stop. Appeal futile, stop. Langston's face darkened. That's a forgery. I received no such rejection. Hargrove was trying to rattle me. Or someone wished you to believe so, Poirot said. He produced the second note, the one found beneath Hargrove's plate. "Meet me in the conservatory. Midnight. Come alone." See, Miss Beaumont's eyes widened. "That's not my handwriting." "Yet it is signed C," Poirot observed. "And you were in the conservatory. I told you I was sketching." Her voice rose, then steadied. "Someone is trying to frame me." "Or to lure Sir Reginald to his death," Poirot said. "But he never reached the conservatory. The poison acted too swiftly." He moved to the mantelpiece where a silver tray held decanters and glasses. He lifted a brandy balloon, swirling the liquid thoughtfully. "Let us consider the poison itself. Cyanide is not found in every pantry. It requires access to a laboratory, perhaps, or a medical stores. Dr. Langston, you carry chemicals?" "Only standard remedies," Langston said. "Digitalis, aspirin, morphine for emergencies. No cyanide." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Yet in the cloakroom I found this." He produced the vial from his pocket, the one labeled KCN. 5G monogrammed VL. Langston stared, his face draining of color. "That's not mine." "My coat, yes, but I've never seen that vial." "Convenient," Miss Beaumont murmured. "Silence," Poirot snapped. "The vial was in your pocket, Doctor. Explain." "I can't," Langston's voice cracked. "Someone planted it. Hargrove, perhaps, to discredit me." "Sir Reginald is dead," Poirot reminded him, "and the seal is intact. The poison came from elsewhere." He turned to Thorne. "Monsieur, your cellar. Do you keep chemicals? Rat poison?" Thorne nodded miserably. "Arsenic for the vermin, but no cyanide. I swear it." Poirot's gaze fell on Geoffrey. "And you, mon garçon? The stables. Do you use poisons there?" "For flies, sir. Prussic acid sometimes, but it's locked in the tack room." "Locked," Poirot repeated. "Yet locks can be picked. Show me." Geoffrey led him to the scullery, where a door opened onto the stable yard. The rain had eased to a steady drizzle, the air thick with the scent of wet stone and manure. The tack room was a small stone building, its door secured by a padlock. Geoffrey produced a key, but Poirot stopped him. "Attendez. Look." The hasp was scratched, the wood splintered. Someone had forced it recently. Inside, shelves held bridles, liniment, and a row of bottles. One, labeled Acidum hydrocyanicum, was missing. "Stolen," Geoffrey whispered. "But I checked this morning." "Someone returned for it tonight," Poirot said. During the 20 minutes the dining room was empty. They returned to the lounge where the others waited in tense silence. Poirot held up the empty space on the shelf, described in vivid detail. Lady Evelyn gasped. Langston's fists clenched. Miss Beaumont lit another cigarette with trembling fingers. "But the glass," Thorne said. "How did the poison get on the rim?" Poirot produced a small tin from his pocket, Revlon's fatal apple lipstick found in Miss Beaumont's room during his earlier search. He opened it, revealing a crimson stick marred by a faint white powder. Voila! Cyanide crystals ground fine and mixed with the wax. Applied to the glass rim, it would dissolve slowly in the port's moisture. The capsule theory was a blind. Le vrai méthode was simpler, more intimate. Miss Beaumont laughed, a brittle sound. "You're mad. That's my lipstick, yes, but I'd hardly poison myself." "You did not," Poirot said. "You applied it to Sir Reginald's glass, knowing he would drink deeply. The residue on the rim matches perfectly." She stared at him, her composure cracking. "You have no proof. I have the vial, the missing bottle, the lipstick, the note," Poirot said. "And this." He produced the rose petal, jasmine-scented, bruised. "From the conservatory floor. Your perfume, madam. You were there waiting for Sir Reginald. When he did not come, you returned to the dining room and watched him die." Lady Evelyn rose, her voice trembling with fury. "Clara? You and Reginald?" "An affair," Poirot confirmed. "Brief, passionate, ended badly." Sir Reginald tired of you, mademoiselle, as he tired of all his conquests. But you wanted more. His fortune, his name. When he refused, you planned this. Miss Beaumont's face twisted. He promised me everything. Then laughed when I believed him. He deserved... Assez! Poirot cut her off. You will confess to the police when they arrive. Until then, you will remain under guard. He turned to Thorne. Lock her in her room. Geoffrey, fetch rope. As they led her away, her protests echoing down the corridor, Poirot faced the others. The case is closed, but one mystery remains. Why the note? Why the conservatory? He glanced at the clock. 11:55, 5 minutes to midnight. Doctor, he said, accompany me. The trap may still spring. They hurried to the conservatory, the glass walls steaming with condensation. The orchids gleamed like ghosts in the moonlight. On the table where Miss Beaumont had sketched lay a single object, a silver pocket watch, its face cracked, stopped at 11:47, the exact time of Hargrove's death. A gift, he murmured, returned with poison. The note was a decoy to lure Sir Reginald here where she could watch him die from the shadows. But he never came. The poison acted in the dining room instead. Langston stared. She planned it all? Oui. A woman scorned, a fortune at stake. But the gray cells, they do not lie. As the clock struck 12, the storm broke anew, and in the distance the wail of a police siren cut through the night. Justice, delayed but inevitable, was coming to the Silver Clock Inn. Chapter 4. Secrets of the Cellar. The confession of Miss Clara Beaumont, wrenched from her in the lounge under the weight of Poirot's evidence, had settled over the Silver Clock Inn like a sudden frost. Yet Hercule Poirot felt no triumph. Only the nagging prickle that told him the puzzle was not yet complete. The storm had eased to a sullen drizzle, but the air remained thick with suspicion. The police siren, faint at first, grew louder, then faded as the flooded bridge swallowed the sound. Help would not come until dawn. Poirot stood in the entrance hall, the grandfather clock ticking with solemn authority. In his hand he held the cracked pocket watch, Clara's gift to Sir Reginald, its hands frozen at 11:47. He turned it over, noting a faint scratch on the case back. A tiny arrow pointing to the stem. A mechanism? He pressed it. The back sprang open, revealing not gears but a folded slip of paper. Poirot's eyebrows ascended. V. Not Clara? Victor Langston? Or another player? The note in the dining room had been signed C. A deliberate misdirection? He glanced at the clock. 12:15. The rendezvous had passed, but the cellar might still yield secrets. He summoned Dr. Langston, who emerged from the dining room where he guarded the body, his face haggard. Poirot, the woman's guilty. Why pursue this? Because, mon ami, the gray cells demand order. A second note. A hidden compartment. This is not the work of a scorned lover alone. Come. They descended the narrow stone stairs to the cellar, lanterns casting long shadows across racks of dusty bottles. The air was cold, heavy with the scent of oak and fermenting grapes. Elias Thorne followed reluctantly, his keys jangling. Nothing down here but wine and rats, he muttered. Poirot ignored him, his torchbeam sweeping the walls. At the far end, behind a barrel marked Chateau Margaux 1899, a section of stonework jutted unevenly. He pressed it. A panel slid aside with a groan, revealing a narrow alcove. Inside, a small laboratory, beakers, a spirit lamp, a mortar stained with white residue, and on a shelf a row of vials, one labeled KCN. Langston stared. My God, Hargrove's private workshop. He was experimenting here? Précisément. Poirot lifted a notebook, its pages filled with Sir Reginald's spidery scrawl formulas, timing mechanisms, and curious a list of names. Lady Evelyn, Clara Beaumont, Victor Langston, Elias Thorne, each with sums beside them, debts, bribes, or blackmail. Thorne paled. He forced me to let him use this space. Said he'd foreclose on the inn if I refused. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And you, doctor? Your name? 5,000. Alone? Langston hesitated. He funded my research, then stole it. I owed him, yes, but I'd never... A crash interrupted him. Geoffrey burst in, soaked from the rain. Sir, the stables. Someone's been there, the tack rooms ransacked. Poirot led them to the stables where the prussic acid bottle lay shattered, its contents seeping into the straw. Footprints, small-heeled, led to a side door. Clara's? But she was locked in her room. Non. Poirot knelt, examining the prints. These are a man's, size 9, perhaps. And look, the mud is fresh, but the heel is worn on the left. Monsieur Thorne, your boots. Thorne lifted his foot, revealing a matching wear pattern. I was checking the horses earlier. The storm. Or planting evidence, Poirot said sharply. The missing bottle. The vial in the doctor's coat. Your doing? Thorne's face crumpled. Hargrove was ruining us. He promised investment, then demanded the inn as collateral. I moved the bottle to frame Clara. She was his mistress, everyone knew. Langston lunged, but Poirot restrained him. Assez. Truth emerges. But the poison on the glass, Clara's lipstick. A scream echoed from upstairs. Lady Evelyn! They raced to her room. The door was ajar, the rope cut. She stood by the window, a dagger in her hand, blood on her sleeve, not hers. He was here, she gasped. A man in a mask. Tried to strangle me. Poirot examined the rope, cut cleanly with a blade. On the floor, a silver button, engraved with a fox matching the port decanter's stopper. The web tightened. Clara's guilt was real, but she had an accomplice, or a rival. As dawn paled the sky, Poirot gathered them in the lounge. The cellar reveals Hargrove's secrets, blackmail, theft, betrayal. Clara poisoned the glass, yes. But another ensured the bottle vanished, the vial appeared in the doctor's coat. A second hand, guiding the drama. He held up the button. This belongs to the decanter. Who handled it last? Geoffrey whispered. Father. He filled it from the cellar cask. Thorne collapsed, sobbing. I only wanted to scare Clara, make her confess. I didn't kill him. Poirot's gaze turned to Langston. And you, doctor? The note signed, V. So, your invitation to the cellar? Langston's eyes widened. I never... The clock struck 1. Outside, a motorboat engine roared. The police navigating the flood. But in the lounge, a shadow moved. A figure in black slipped toward the door. Poirot shouted, Arrêtez! The chase was on. Chapter 5. The Midnight Confession. The figure in black was gone before Poirot's shout had finished echoing. A swirl of damp wool, the slam of the garden door, and the lounge was empty save for the frantic breathing of the living. Rain lashed the windows again as if the storm itself had returned to mock them. Poirot was already moving. Doctor, the terrace. Thorne, the kitchen bolt. Geoffrey upstairs, lock every room. His voice cracked like a whip. Langston snatched a poker from the hearth and followed. Thorne lumbered after, keys clattering. Geoffrey bolted up the staircase 2 at a time. Lady Evelyn stood trembling, the dagger still in her hand. Poirot took it gently. Madame, sit. Breathe. The blade. Whose? I don't know. He dropped it when I slashed. His sleeve. She lifted her arm. A shallow cut wept crimson through the torn silk. He whispered, The clock knows. Then the rope snapped at my throat. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The clock knows. The phrase from the hidden note in the watch. He pressed a handkerchief to her wound. You are safe now. Stay with Geoffrey. He stepped onto the terrace. The night was a wall of wet darkness, but the gravel path gleamed where footprints had churned it to mud. Langston's torch beam cut a narrow tunnel. There, toward the orchard, they ran. Branches clawed at their coats, mud sucked at their shoes. The footprints veered left toward the old ice house, a domed brick structure half swallowed by ivy. The door hung ajar. Inside, the air was frigid, smelling of earth and decay. Ice blocks from last winter still lay in the pit, shrouded in sawdust. Langston's torch swept the gloom and froze on a figure crouched behind a crate. "Out!" Poirot commanded. The figure rose slowly. A man, tall, soaked, a black balaclava masking his face. In his gloved hand glinted a small revolver. "Drop it!" Langston growled, poker raised. The man's laugh was muffled. "You're too late, Poirot. The game is mine." Poirot's voice was calm. "The game, monsieur, is never over until the last piece falls. Remove the mask." A hesitation. Then the man ripped it free. Dr. Victor Langston stared at Dr. Victor Langston. The real Langston, the one with the poker, staggered. "Impossible." The masked man smiled, a cruel twist. "Not impossible, merely theatrical. Allow me to introduce myself properly. Vincent Langston, Victor's twin, the forgotten brother." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Tiens, the prodigal returns." Vincent's eyes glittered. "Prodigal? Disinherited, more like. Hargrove ruined us both. Victor got the practice, the patents. I got the debts. When Hargrove offered a partnership, his money for my silence on certain experiments, I agreed. Then he reneged. Tonight was to be my payment." Langston Victor found his voice. "You murdered him?" "I arranged the stage," Vincent sneered. "Clara's lipstick, the vial in your coat, the notes, my penmanship." She thought she acted alone. I ensured she had the means. Poirot stepped forward. "And the attack on Lady Evelyn?" "To silence her." She knew about the experiments, Hargrove's attempts to weaponize cyanide timing. A drop on a watch hand, released at a precise hour. She was to be the demonstration. Langston lunged, but Poirot restrained him. "No. The police boat approaches. Your brother will answer for 2 murders attempted." Vincent's grin faded. He raised the revolver, but Geoffrey appeared in the doorway, a shotgun leveled. "Drop it, sir! Father's orders!" The gun clattered to the stone. Vincent sagged, defeated. Back in the lounge, dawn's gray light filtered through the windows. Vincent sat handcuffed to a chair improvised with curtain cords, while Victor paced, face ashen. Clara Beaumont, fetched from her room, stared at her accomplice in horror. "You used me," she whispered. "You used yourself," Vincent replied coldly. "Your jealousy was the perfect mask." Poirot addressed the room. "The truth, Sir Reginald blackmailed all of you. Lady Evelyn, his affairs. Clara, her novels, plagiarized research. Thorne, his debts. Victor, stolen patents." Vincent orchestrated the murder to frame Clara, inherit through chaos and silence witnesses. The clock was to be the final act. Lady Evelyn poisoned at dawn by a rigged timepiece. He held up the pocket watch, but the mechanism jammed. Hargrove died early in the dining room. Vincent improvised, the attack, the ice house. Lady Evelyn spoke, voice steady now. Reginald kept a second will. If he died suspiciously, everything went to charity. Vincent needed Clara convicted to void it. Précisément. Poirot turned to Vincent. "Your mistake was the button. The fox matches the decanter and your cufflink, lost in the struggle." Vincent laughed bitterly. "Details. Always details." The police launch nosed against the terrace at 5:47 a.m. Constables swarmed in, led by a sodden Inspector Japp, who clapped Poirot on the shoulder. "Heard you had a spot of bother, old chap." "Merely a family reunion," Poirot said dryly. As Vincent was led away, he paused. "Tell Victor, blood forgives nothing." Victor turned his back. Clara was taken next, weeping silently. Thorne embraced his son. Lady Evelyn stood alone, staring at the silver clock as it chimed 6. Poirot approached her. "Madame, the nightmare ends." She met his gaze, eyes ancient. "Does it?" Reginald's sins poisoned us all. Outside, the sun broke through, gilding the flooded meadows. The silver clock inn ticked on, its secrets buried with the dawn. Chapter 6. The Ticking Enigma. Dawn had barely crept over the sodden hills when Hercule Poirot stood alone in the entrance hall, the silver clock's pendulum slicing the silence with metronomic precision. The arrests, Clara Beaumont, Vincent Langston, had been swift, the police launch cutting back across the floodwaters with its grim cargo. Yet Poirot's little gray cells refused to rest. A final discord nagged at him, a note out of tune in the symphony of guilt. He turned the cracked pocket watch in his palm. Time is ours, Clara had inscribed. But whose time had truly run out? He pressed the hidden catch again. The compartment yawned empty. The second note. The cellar holds the truth. Midnight. Vdike had led to Vincent's laboratory, yes, but the handwriting. He fetched Clara's confession, signed in her looping script. The V was identical, same flourish, same pressure. Vincent had forged it, but why lure Hargrove to the cellar if the poison was already on the glass? Poirot's gaze lifted to the grandfather clock. Its face gleamed like a moon, Roman numerals stark against silver. He had noticed it before Hargrove's design, Thorne had said, a prototype. He stepped closer, fingers tracing the ornate hands. The minute hand was loose, wobbling slightly. He grasped it gently and twisted. A soft click. The clock face swung outward on concealed hinges, revealing a cavity no larger than a cigar box. Inside, a bundle of letters tied with black ribbon, a tiny glass file stoppered with wax, and a brass key. Poirot's breath caught, the file empty but its interior filmed with white crystals. Cyanide residue. The letters were addressed to my dearest R in a feminine hand. He untied the ribbon. The first letter, dated 3 months prior. You promised me the world, Reginald, but you give me scraps. The patent is mine, my father's work. Return it or I expose everything. E.E., not Clara. Evelyn. Poirot's pulse quickened. Lady Evelyn Hargrove, grieving widow or architect of her husband's demise. He read on. The letters grew desperate, then venomous. Threats of scandal, ruin, suicide. The final one undated. The clock will strike for you at midnight. The hand will deliver your fate. You stole my life. I reclaim it. Poirot closed the compartment. The loose, minute hand, the silver hand, a delivery mechanism. He examined it under his magnifying lens. A hairline groove along the edge, a microscopic bead of dried wax. The poison had been embedded there, released by the clock's motion at 11:47, precisely when Hargrove collapsed. But Clara's lipstick on the glass. Vincent's forged notes, a convergence of schemes, footsteps on the stairs. Lady Evelyn descended, wrapped in a traveling cloak, a small valise in hand. Her face was pale but composed, the cut on her arm bandaged. Monsieur Poirot, she said softly. The police have gone. I thought to leave before the press arrives. Un moment, madame. He held up the letters. These were hidden in the clock. Your clock, I believe. Your father's design, stolen by Sir Reginald. Her step faltered. You read them? Oui. You plan to kill him with the clock hand. A poetic justice. But Clara acted first with the lipstick. Vincent manipulated both of you, his brother's rival, your husband's lover. 3 poisons, 1 death. She laughed, a brittle sound. 3. The clock was never loaded. I threatened, yes, but I couldn't. I loved him even as I hated him. She opened the valise. Inside, the missing prussic acid bottle from the stables, unopened. I took this to frame Clara if needed. But Vincent beat me to it. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Then the attack on you last night. Vincent, she confirmed. He suspected I knew about the twins. When Clara confessed, he tried to silence me. The dagger was mine, stolen from my room. She set the bottle on the table. I'm leaving, monsieur. The will. Charity gets everything. I have nothing left but my name. Poirot watched her go, the door closing softly behind her. The clock struck 7, its chimes pure and clear. In the dining room, Dr. Victor Langston packed his medical bag, face etched with exhaustion. My brother's madness ends here, he said. Ill testify. The patent. Let the courts decide. Poirot nodded. And the vial in your coat? Vincent's plant. He wanted me discredited, imprisoned, a clean sweep. Thorne entered, Geoffrey at his side. The inn's mine again, free of debt. Hargrove's lawyer telephoned. The will's void with murder proven. Charity refused the blood money. Poirot smiled faintly. Justice, though tangled, prevails. As the sun climbed, Poirot stood on the terrace. The floodwaters receded, revealing the orchard's gnarled trees. He opened his hand. The brass key from the clock. It fit the icehouse door, Vincent's final hideout. Inside, a locked trunk. The key turned. Documents spilled out. Hargrove's true will, naming Geoffrey Thorne heir to the inn's mortgage, forgiven. A confession, Hargrove's own, detailing the patent theft, the blackmail, the faked death plan. He had intended to disappear. Frame Chapter 7. Pursuit in the mist. The morning mist clung to the Devon hills like a guilty conscience, thick enough to swallow sound and sight. Hercule Poirot stood on the terrace of the Silver Clock Inn, the brass key from the icehouse trunk cold in his palm. The revelations inside, Hargrove's true will, his confession, the forged death plan should have ended the affair. Yet the little gray cells buzzed. One thread remained untied. Geoffrey Thorne approached, cap in hand. The police launch is returning, sir. Inspector Japp wants you at the dock. Poirot nodded. Bien. But first, the orchard. The footprints from last night. Show me. They crossed the sodden lawn to the gnarled apple trees. The mud had hardened overnight, preserving prints. Small, healed, leading from the icehouse to a gap in the stone wall. Poirot knelt. A woman's shoe, size 5. Lady Evelyn's? Geoffrey shook his head. She left by motor at dawn. Wilkinson drove her to the station. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Then another woman, or a man in disguise. A glint in the grass, a silver cufflink, fox-headed, matching the decanter stopper and the button from Lady Evelyn's room. Poirot pocketed it. Vincent Langston wore these. He escaped the launch. Impossible, Geoffrey said. I locked him in the cabin myself. Poirot's gaze swept the mist. Locks, mon garçon, are suggestions to the clever. They followed the prints to the wall. Beyond lay a narrow lane churned to ruts. Tire tracks, fresh, deep. A vehicle had waited here, then fled toward the moors. Back at the inn, Dr. Victor Langston waited in the lounge, his face gaunt. My brother's gone. The constable guarding him was found unconscious. Chloroform. Vincent stole the launch's dinghy. Poirot's mustache bristled. He plays the last act. The trunk. Did you know of Hargrove's confession? Langston hesitated. He hinted at faking his death. I thought it madness, but the patents my governor designed, he patented it under his name. I came here to confront him, not kill. Yet your brother used you, Poirot said. The vial, the notes, all to frame you if Clara failed. Langston's fists clenched. Vincent always envied me. Our father left me the practice. He got nothing. Hargrove promised him a share if he silenced me. Elias Thorne burst in, breathless. The cellar, someone's been there. The laboratories ransacked. The cyanide file, gone. Poirot raced downstairs. The hidden alcove was chaos, beakers shattered, the notebook torn. A single page remained, pinned by a dagger. Lady Evelyn's from her room. Scrawled in red ink. Poirot glanced at his watch. 9:17. Less than 3 hours. The church, he said. Vincent lures us, but why? Langston's voice was grim. Hargrove kept a safe there. Parish records, he claimed. Really his blackmail files. If Vincent destroys them, his motive dies with Hargrove. Poirot nodded. And Lady Evelyn? Where does she fit? A horn sounded outside. Wilkinson's Austin skidded to a halt. Sir! Lady Evelyn, she never reached the station. Her train was cancelled. She's walking the Moors Road. Poirot's mind raced. Evelyn, the letters, the cufflink. She had not left. She was part of Vincent's endgame. He turned to Thorne. Your motorbike, Jeffrey's. It will cut across the fields. Geoffrey fetched it, a battered BSA, its engine coughing to life. Poirot climbed behind, clutching his Homburg. Langston ran alongside. Take me. Nah, guard the inn. The police will need you. The bike roared off, mud spraying. The moors unfolded in folds of gray mist, the church spire a distant needle. Poirot's eyes watered in the wind, but his mind was clear. Vincent wanted the files, to burn them or use them. Evelyn was bait or accomplice. At 10:43 they reached the church, a squat Norman tower, its door ajar. Inside, dust motes danced in stained glass light. The nave was empty, but a scraping came from the crypt. Poirot descended stone steps. The crypt was a vault of shadows, tombs lining the walls. At the far end, Vincent Langston knelt before a rusted safe, tools scattered. Beside him, bound and gagged, sat Lady Evelyn, her eyes wide with terror. Vincent spun, revolver raised. Back, Poirot, the files burn, and with them the past. Poirot stepped forward, hands raised. I say, you killer, you hang, the confession, Hargroves, clears you of murder. Why this? Vincent's laugh was hollow. Clears me? He named me his executor. With him dead I inherit, unless Evelyn contests. She knew too much. Evelyn muffled a cry. Poirot's gaze flicked to the safe. Open files spilling. One caught his eye, a marriage certificate. Reginald Hargrove and Evelyn Beaumont, 1918. Clara's sister? Tiens, Poirot murmured. The widow is no widow. Bigamy. Hargrove's first wife, alive in Canada. You, madame, married a lie. Vincent snarled. She blackmailed him for years. I offered silence for a price. When Clara poisoned him, I saw my chance. He struck a match. The files flared. Poirot lunged, but Vincent fired. Crack! The bullet grazing Poirot's shoulder. Geoffrey tackled him from behind, the revolver skittering across the stone. Evelyn freed herself, snatching the dagger from Vincent's belt. You used my sister, she screamed, slashing his arm. Vincent howled, collapsing. Poirot staunched his wound with a handkerchief. The clock strikes. Twice, yes. But time catches the guilty. Police boots thundered above. Jap burst in, cuffs ready. Poirot! You all right? Toujours, Poirot said, wincing. Arrest him. And her. For conspiracy. As Vincent was dragged away, he spat. The silver hand was mine. Evelyn, unbound, faced Poirot. I wanted justice, not murder. Clara acted alone. I only wanted the files, to burn the lie. Poirot's eyes were sad. Justice, madame, is not yours to wield. Outside, the mist lifted. The church bell tolled noon, its note pure and final. The silver clock inn's shadow lengthened, but its secrets were buried at last. Chapter 8. Shattered Illusions. The crypt of Ashford Church smelled of damp stone and scorched paper. The blackened remnants of Hargrove's files curled like dead leaves around the open safe. Inspector Japp's constables hauled Vincent Langston up the steps, his arm bleeding, his curses echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Lady Evelyn Hargrove, no, Evelyn Beaumont, stood pale but defiant, wrists cuffed, the dagger confiscated. Poirot pressed his handkerchief to the graze on his shoulder. The sting a minor irritation compared to the ache in his little gray cells. The puzzle was nearly complete, yet one shard of glass remained unplaced. Japp clapped Poirot on the back, gently. You're a marvel, old man. Bigamy, blackmail, twins, and a poisoned clock hand. The yard will dine out on this for years. Poirot winced. Pas tout à fait, Inspector. The hand was never poisoned. A bluff, like much else. He turned to Evelyn. Madame, you married Hargrove knowing his first wife lived? She lifted her chin. I was 19. He promised annulment, wealth, escape from poverty. Clara, my sister, discovered the truth years later. She came here to confront him, fell into his arms instead. When he discarded her, she poisoned the glass. I planned the clock to frighten him into confession. Vincent twisted it all. Vincent, slumped against a tomb, laughed weakly. Twisted? I improved it. Hargrove promised me half his empire to silence Victor. When Clara acted, I saw the perfect storm. Poirot's gaze swept the crypt, yet the silver hand, the minute hand, was clean. The lipstick was Clara's alone. The vial in Victor's coat, the notes, the attack on Evelyn, all your improvisations. But the cufflink in the orchard. He produced the fox-headed stud. This fell from your sleeve, Vincent, during the struggle with Evelyn last night. You wore Hargrove's coat, stolen from the cloakroom, to impersonate him if needed. Vincent's eyes flickered. Details. Non, the devil's currency. Poirot turned to Jap. Search the icehouse trunk again. There is more. Back at the inn, the mist had burned off, sunlight glinting on the silver clock sign. Geoffrey met them at the door, eyes wide. Sir! The grandfather clock, it's ticking backward. Poirot strode to the hall. The pendulum swung counterclockwise, the hands retreating from 12:30 to 12:29. He opened the face. The mechanism had been reversed. Gears flipped by. Expert fingers. A note pinned inside. Reginald. Impossible. Yet the handwriting matched Hargrove's confession. Poirot's mind raced. Faked death. The port sugar. Slow cyanide, meant to simulate heart failure. Clara's lipstick accelerated it. Vincent's clock hand was to finish the job if Hargrove survived. But Hargrove himself... The laboratory, Poirot snapped. Now. They descended to the cellar. The hidden alcove was pristine, beakers realigned, notebook restored. On the bench, a dummy torso, waxen, dressed in Hargrove's dinner jacket, face molded to his likeness. A wig of walrus mustache completed the illusion. Beside it, a broken vial, cyanide, spilled deliberately. Geoffrey gasped. The body? We buried the wrong man? No. Poirot lifted the dummy's arm. Beneath the sleeve, a pulse beat faintly. The body stirred, eyes fluttering open. Sir Reginald Hargrove groaned. Poirot. Damn your eyes, Jap swore. He's alive? Barely, Poirot said. The sugar held trace cyanide, enough to collapse him, not kill. Clara's lipstick finished the dose, but Hargrove planned to switch places with the dummy post-mortem, escape with the files, frame Clara, leave Evelyn ruined. Vincent discovered the plot, used it. Hargrove coughed. The clock, reversed to signal I was alive. The note, my last card. Poirot's voice was ice. You blackmailed, stole, bigamized. Your wife, Evelyn, enabled you. Clara killed for love. Vincent for greed. All of you shattered illusions. He turned to Jap. Arrest him for fraud, conspiracy. Evelyn for accessory, Vincent for attempted murder. Clara remains for the poison. Hargrove lunged weakly, but constables pinned him. The patent. It's mine. No. Victor Langston stepped from the shadows, holding the original governor blueprint. Father's design. Mine by right. The cellar door burst open. Clara Beaumont, escorted by a constable, stared at the living Hargrove. You bastard, she whispered, then spat in his face. Poirot watched the tableau. Greed, love, betrayal, humanity's oldest gears. The silver clock ticks true, he said. But men wind it false. Upstairs, the grandfather clock chimed one, forward now, restored. Poirot reset the hands to one adois. Outside, the Austin waited. Geoffrey offered a hand. Will you stay, sir? Poirot smiled. No. Justice is served. The inn is yours. Debt-free, secret-free. As the car pulled away, the silver clock sign caught the sun, flashing like a warning. Poirot closed his eyes. Another case, another mirror shattered. Chapter 9. The Gray Cells Awaken. The Silver Clock Inn stood bathed in pale afternoon light, its windows open to the first real breeze in days. The air smelled of wet earth and wood smoke, and for the first time since Poirot's arrival, the grandfather clock ticked with the calm certainty of a heart that had never faltered. Yet inside the oak-paneled lounge, the atmosphere was anything but calm. Sir Reginald Hargrove sat handcuffed to a chair, his face mottled with rage and the lingering pallor of near death. Beside him, Evelyn Beaumont, once Lady Hargrove, stared at the floor, wrists bound, the pearls at her throat now seeming like a noose. Vincent Langston, arm bandaged, slumped under guard, his eyes fixed on his twin brother Victor with a hatred that burned colder than the grave. Clara Beaumont, pale and silent, was led in last, her novelist's hands trembling as she took in the living man she had believed dead. Inspector Japp stood by the fireplace, notebook open, voice brisk. "Right, Poirot. You've got 5 minutes to tie this knot before I cart the lot to Exeter. Hargrove alive, bigamy, patent fraud, attempted murder, make it clear." Poirot did not pace. He stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back, the green eyes luminous. When he spoke, the room fell silent. "Mesdames et messieurs, the case is a clockwork of illusions, each gear turning another. Let us wind it back to the beginning. Dr. Victor Langston invents the chronometric governor. Hargrove steals it, patents it, threatens ruin. Victor comes to confront. Vincent, the disinherited twin, sees opportunity. Evelyn Beaumont, née Clara's sister, marries Hargrove in 1918. He conceals his living first wife in Canada. Evelyn discovers the truth, blackmails him for luxury. Clara, visiting, falls in love, is discarded, plots revenge with lipstick and cyanide. Hargrove, cornered by debts and rivals, plans escape. He builds the dummy in the cellar, doses the port sugar with trace cyanide to simulate collapse, arranges the reversed clock signal. After death, he switches places, burns files, vanishes with forged identity. Vincent learns the plan. He accelerates it, plants vial in Victor's coat, forges notes, ensures Clara's lipstick is laced with lethal dose. When Hargrove collapses early, Vincent improvises, attacks Evelyn to silence her, steals dinghy, heads to church safe. Poirot's gaze swept the room, but the dummy was never switched. Clara's poison killed Hargrove truly. The sugar was harmless, Vincent's clock hand, empty. Evelyn's threats, bluff. All believed the other guilty. The silver clock alone kept true time. Hargrove snarled, "I'd have been gone if not for her damned lipstick." Clara laughed, a broken sound. "You promised me the stars, Reginald. I gave you night." Evelyn lifted her head. "I wanted the files burned to protect my sister. Vincent promised help. For a price." Vincent shrugged. "Blood and greed, Poirot. Simple gears." Poirot turned to Japp. "Charges." Japp snapped his notebook shut. "Done." As the prisoners were led out, Poirot approached the grandfather clock. He opened the face, removed the reversed gear, and reset the mechanism. The hands moved forward, 1:47, the exact minute of the toast. Geoffrey Thorne watched, eyes bright. "The inn's mine now, sir. Debt forgiven. Will you stay for tea?" Poirot smiled. "Non, mon garçon, but keep the clock wound. It is the only honest witness." Outside, the Austin waited. Wilkinson held the door. Poirot paused on the step, looking back at the silver clock sign, now gleaming in the sun. He raised his hat. "Adieu. Time. She reveals all." The car rolled down the lane, the inn shrinking in the mirror. Poirot closed his eyes, the case filed neatly in the archives of his mind. Another illusion shattered, another truth restored. Chapter 10. The Grand Revelation. The lounge of the Silver Clock Inn had been transformed into a court of final reckoning. Afternoon sunlight slanted through the mullioned windows, gilding the dust motes that drifted like slow confetti above the long oak table. Every chair was occupied, every face turned toward the small, impeccable figure at the head. Hercule Poirot, hands folded, mustache waxed to twin points of absolute certainty. Inspector Japp leaned against the mantel, arms crossed, a half-smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Constables flanked the doors. The prisoners, 4 of them, sat in a row. Sir Reginald Hargrove alive and furious. Evelyn Beaumont composed but pale. Vincent Langston, arm in a sling, eyes glittering with defeat. Clara Beaumont, the novelist, her crimson lipstick now a memory, her gaze fixed on the table as though it might open and swallow her. Poirot did not raise his voice. He did not need to. When he spoke, the room itself seemed to hold its breath. Mesdames et messieurs, the curtain falls. The play is over. But before the actors are led away, let us walk once more through the machinery of this tragedy, so that no gear remains hidden, no spring unsprung. He lifted a single finger. Dr. Victor Langston, here present, though innocent, invents the chronometric governor, a device to regulate machinery with unheard-of precision. Sir Reginald Hargrove, his patron, steals the blueprints, patents them, and threatens ruin if Victor protests. Vincent, the disenfranchised twin, is recruited by Hargrove to silence his brother. Thus the first lie is forged. Second finger. Evelyn Beaumont, aged 19, marries Hargrove in 1918. He conceals his first wife, alive in Toronto, promising annulment that never comes. Evelyn discovers the bigamy, chooses silence for wealth. Years later, her sister Clara visits, falls in love with Hargrove, is seduced and discarded. Clara, wounded, vows revenge, third finger. Hargrove, drowning in debts and enemies, devises escape. In the cellar laboratory, he constructs a wax dummy, perfect likeness, dressed in his dinner jacket. He laces the port sugar with trace cyanide, enough to collapse him into apparent death. After the corpse is pronounced dead, he plans to switch places, burn the church safe's blackmail files, and vanish with a forged passport. The reversed clock is his signal. I live. Fourth finger. Clara, unaware of the dummy, acts first. She grinds cyanide into her Revlon Fatal apple lipstick, applies it to the rim of Hargrove's glass during the unattended 20 minutes before dinner. The port's acidity dissolves the wax, releasing a lethal dose. Hargrove collapses at 11:47, truly dead this time. The dummy remains untouched in the cellar. Poirot's gaze swept the row of prisoners. Vincent, seeing Hargrove die too early, improvises. He plants the KCN vial in Victor's coat, forges notes signed C and V, attacks Evelyn to silence her knowledge of the bigamy, steals the dinghy, races to the church safe. His goal: destroy evidence, frame Clara fully, inherit through chaos. The fox cufflinks, stolen from Hargrove's coat, are his calling card, lost in the struggle. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Poirot turned to Clara. You, mademoiselle, killed with love, turned to hate. The lipstick was yours alone. To Hargrove. You, monsieur, died by your own greed. Your faked death became real. To Evelyn. You, madame, enabled every lie for a title that was dust. To Vincent. You, the puppeteer, pulled strings that snapped in your hands. He reached into his pocket and laid 5 objects on the table like cards in a winning hand. Japp stepped forward. Charges stand. Murder, conspiracy, fraud, bigamy, attempted murder. The Crown thanks you, Poirot. As the prisoners were led out, Hargrove cursing, Evelyn weeping silently, Vincent laughing bitterly, Clara staring ahead like a woman already in another world. Poirot approached the grandfather clock. He opened the face, removed the reversed gear, and reset the hands to 3:47, the exact minute the toast had been raised. Geoffrey Thorne, now sole proprietor, stood beside him. The inn's mine, free and clear. What happens to the clock? Poirot smiled. Keep it wound, mon garçon. It is the only honest soul in this house. He turned to Victor Langston, who waited by the door, patent blueprints in hand. The governor is yours, doctor. Use it well. Victor inclined his head. I will. And thank you. Outside, the Austin idled. Wilkinson held the door. Poirot paused on the threshold, looking back at the silver clock sign, now catching the late sun like a beacon. He raised his Homburg. Le temps ne ment jamais. Time never lies. The car rolled down the lane, the inn shrinking in the mirror. Poirot closed his eyes, the case filed forever in the perfect order of his mind. Another illusion shattered, another truth gleaming like silver restored.